Welcome to another inspiring episode of the Nigerian Community Chronicles Podcast, where we celebrate remarkable Nigerians who are shaping the world through their leadership, innovation, and commitment to positive change. Today, we are honored to host a trailblazer in equality, diversity, and inclusion, and a champion of community engagement, Grace Moronfolu MBE. Grace is a seasoned professional whose distinguished career in the Crown Prosecution Service has left an indelible mark on governance and inclusion. Renowned for her innovative solutions in equality, diversity, and inclusion, she has led transformative initiatives that have raised awareness of the criminal justice process and strengthened community engagement. Through her leadership roles in networks such as the CPS, National Black Crown Prosecution Association, and the Civil Service Race Forum, Grace has been at the forefront of driving systemic change and fostering inclusivity. Her extraordinary contributions were recognized with an MBE in 2018, a testament of her outstanding service and unwavering dedication. Now, as the director of Carbonado Consultancy, Grace continues to make an impact by helping organizations enhance their social capital through creative solutions that deliver corporate social responsibility and environmental social governance outcomes. Grace has also served as a non-executive director at Loughborough University Student Union, further demonstrating her passion for promoting leadership, inclusion, and social responsibility. Today, we will delve into our inspiring journey, our approach to fostering systemic change, and our vision for building a more inclusive society. Grace, it is a privilege to have you on the podcast. Welcome to Nigerian Community Chronicles Podcast.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful introduction. I wasn't even sure who you were talking about. It's wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
feel really privileged and proud to be here. And, it's just a great opportunity to talk about myself and what I've been doing in the UK.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm sure, our viewers will like you to, share with us your journey and what inspired you to pursue a career in governance, diversity, and inclusion.
Well, to be honest with you, I fell into equality, diversity, and inclusion through my career journey in the Crown Prosecution Service. When I joined the Crown Prosecution Service over 30 years ago, I didn't think I was going to be staying in that job for that many decades, to be honest with you. And the job gave me the opportunity to have an experience of different professions. I did all sorts of professions. I did project management, I did internal audit, I did training and development. And towards the end of my career, that is when I fell into equality, diversity, inclusion, and community engagement.
No, that's interesting. Now, I'm sure, this is beginning to get exciting. And we would like to know how your childhood experiences in Nigeria and adulthood in the UK influenced your passion for leadership and social impact.
I think my experiences in Nigeria have obviously shaped me. I was born in the UK. I left the UK when I was around 11 and went to Nigeria. I lived in Nigeria for 10 years, where I did my secondary school education, and also I went to the Polytechnic Ibadan, where I studied fine art. Nigeria is an amazing country. It gives people who live there or experience living there an amazing opportunity to develop resilience and focus. Nigeria, we talk about all the disadvantages it has, but one of the advantages it has, it really helps people understand what's important and how to focus on it. So I think for me, growing up in Nigeria, that was one of the biggest bonuses, is understanding that life is what you make it. You have to be very determined to achieve whatever your vision or dream is for yourself. And you mustn't give up. I think that's one of the things that Nigerians across the globe have demonstrated our focus and resilience. And also, I think one of the poignant issues for me in relation to my career in equality, diversity, inclusion is about my approach to it.
Right.
I think in Nigeria, my experience was that you shouldn't focus on your emotion necessarily when things don't go right. You have to focus objectively on the reasons why things aren't working the way you need them to, and find solutions to that, rather than focus on the emotional hurt and devastation oftentimes that inequality, prejudice, and discrimination can bring. I think that's what I've really learned. That's what's helped me in my career.
Okay. So when you compare that to your adulthood in UK, what does that, bring to light as well?
I think adulthood in the UK was very challenging for me.
Right.
I think in Nigeria, you're on survival mode, but when you get here, your dial for survival is turned slightly differently. I think the expectation is life in the UK is going to be somewhat easier, but actually it's just as vicious and stark as it is in Nigeria, but you have a different way of responding to the challenges. So as an adult, I think, to be honest with you, in the early days, I think I drifted a little bit without much focus, because you know what it's like. You feel, I'm here, I'm in London, I'm back in the UK. And I think that was a slight disadvantage for me. I wish I'd had more focus, because that's how I got a job in the Crown Prosecution Service. And even though I had a long career there and I had lots of different professional experiences, I think I wasn't necessarily focused on a career in my head, to be honest with you. In the CPS, I had a job. It was only towards the end of my career I realized it was a career. I'm sure you understand the subtle difference.
I do understand, yes.
But notwithstanding that, because of my Nigerian upbringing, and my focus wasn't necessarily on career, it was on how do I get more money to feed my child at the time, and give him the best outcome I could at the time. That became my focus within the job I had. And if someone like me, I love new experiences. So in the CPS, it was a wonderful place for people who had families and children.
Right.
It enabled you to fulfill your vision for yourself, to be honest, in some respects, while having the support that the organization wouldn't penalize you too much because you had a child or you had a family. And that was my experience. It might be very different for other people. But I found it. But then the repercussions of that is I didn't have a dynamic career, with lots of promotions, and I had a career path, but it wasn't as dynamic as it could have been, because I had to make that choice between career and family. You know what I mean? So
I do.
But I still loved it.
Thank you. That's very good. Let's look into CPS a little bit. So during your time at CPS, you were instrumental in driving equality, diversity, and inclusion, agenda. What were some of the key challenges and successes in implementing these initiatives?
It's interesting, because I think I have to, before I answer that question, I need to kind of clarify why I stayed in the CPS so long. What was interesting about the Crown Prosecution Service was the nature of the work. The CPS is the organization that makes a decision about whether or not to prosecute a case after the police have arrested somebody, gather the evidence. Generally speaking, the CPS then look at that evidence, decide what charge. Well, if they think there's enough evidence to charge, and then they present those cases in court. And what I found was the inequality in life generally has a huge impact on your experience as you're going through the criminal justice system. So even if you strip race out of the agenda, if you're from a poor background, you're more likely to have a very negative experience with the criminal justice system. People who have fair outcomes tend to be people who can afford expensive barristers, who can argue their case in court and things like that. And I was surprised at the level of injustice there was in relation to people's family circumstances when it comes to getting justice. And it's sometimes I think we're distracted, especially in the UK. Race is a distraction from the inequalities that go on across the board. I think society likes people to focus on race and LGBT to kind of distract the populace that actually there's much more unfairness that you can see that actually affects white people, the white community. But because they're told, oh, look at race, knife crime and all this kind of stuff, they're distracted from the unfairness that happens to them. So for me, as I joined the CPS, I experienced a lot of unfairness and discrimination. But at the time, that was in the early 90s. To be honest with you, there wasn't a word to articulate it. Because in those days, you didn't use racism and prejudice wasn't common language, to be honest with you. But the CPS went through an enormous transformation. In the late 1980s, the CPS was taken to court by a lot of staff, lawyers in particular, that felt that they'd been treated unfairly. These were ethnic minority lawyers. And to be fair with you, a lot of them were women who were highly qualified, very experienced, but found that every time they applied for promotion, they wouldn't get promotion, but you'd get more junior white staff with less experience being promoted before them. And thank God, because they were lawyers, they were able to take the CPS to court. And over the period of time, the CPS lost around 5 or 6 cases in the employment tribunal. Cases that showed the CPS was being racist towards its staff. But not only that, the community had also expressed some concerns in the way ethnic minority defendants were being treated, and the way ethnic minority, the community were being treated, by the way the charges were being brought and the outcomes. And I'll just give you a tiny example. You already know that if you're a black male who drives a nice car, the police are more likely to stop you. And when the police, back in those days, when the police used to stop you and you'd kind of say, why are you asking for my particulars? I own this car. They would add a charge of obstructing police and things like that. But when it got to court, you'd find that those cases, these are, I'm just explaining that, these are charges that the CPS would have approved for charging. They actually found when it got to court that there wasn't any evidence to back up the charges, which is what the role of the CPS was supposed to do, to make sure that if it presents cases, there's evidence to back these things up. And there was evidence to show that a lot of cases against ethnic minority people were not backed up with any evidence, which the CPS should have been stopping. Anyway, around the same time, you had Stephen Lawrence. Remember the Stephen Lawrence issue?
Yeah, I remember Stephen Lawrence issue, yes.
So there was a mandate to all the criminal justice agencies who were involved in prosecuting offences to look at their systems. And this was in the, early 1990s, and try and address any discrimination and inequality. And to the CPS's credit, I think it was the only criminal justice agency that took it really, really seriously.
Right.
So when luckily for me, I was part of that renaissance. So what the CPS did, they hired in an inequality and diversity team that wasn't part of the original CPS HR structure. And that team not only reviewed, worked with staff and other colleagues to review the way the CPS treated its staff, it also looked at the way the CPS dealt with the community. the CPS's own biases and prejudices. It looked at everything very holistically. I must say, it wasn't on one day. This is over a period of probably 20, 15 years. And that's why it's this type of stuff takes a long time. And it wasn't easy, obviously. The CPS was kicking a lot of staff, as you can imagine, were outraged that how can the CPS even presume that it wasn't a racist organization when it's only a few bad eggs. That's what they always say. It's only one or two people that behave like this. But the CPS had a very holistic approach. And part of that approach was to set up staff networks, because staff at the time were part of the problem. Staff explained, especially ethnic minority staff, was that when there was a problem with a manager or so, it was very hard to raise the issue with along up the senior management chain.
Yeah.
Because in those days, there was a very strict hierarchy when I joined the civil service anyway. But what the CPS did, they developed staff networks. So ordinary staff could have access to power. So you could actually have access to the directors and people like that. We take it for granted now, but at the time it was very innovative. And I was part of that renaissance. So we were able to articulate some of the challenges. And you asked me what got me involved.
Yeah, I know. I didn't want to interrupt you. It's quite interesting, honestly. Yeah. And I'm sure our viewers will enjoy and take a note from what you're saying. So please go on.
So the point I'm trying to get, as part of that process, it built staff's confidence, because people, nowadays, especially with the guy that was killed in America. My brain has gone dead. What's his name? George Floyd.
George Floyd, yes.
Everyone, the momentum of George Floyd, they said that, people staff in buildings should, speak to their management teams and tell them what the issues were. It's not easy to talk about the concerns you've had to the people who've been treating you with disregard and disrespect over years, and suddenly they say they want to know what's the problem when they obviously know what the problem is. So for us in the CPS, before that all happened, before George Floyd, there was a program of increasing staff's confidence to be able to articulate. And I was part of that program. And even though I wasn't involved in equality and diversity at the time, it was very empowering to be able to articulate what was going on around you. Always interested me. It's interesting because back in those days, one of the amazing things that happened, especially for the National Black Crown Prosecution Association, there was an awareness that you can't rely on the organization to solve your problems for you.
Right.
You have to think outside the box sometimes. So what we started doing was, for example, when there was a recruitment drive where the CPS said they want new lawyers, what would happen is we'd have a lot of staff who were not in legal positions but had masters in law or even PhDs in law. This is ethnic minority, Black staff. When they'd apply for these roles, these opportunities, they wouldn't get them. And we used to be perplexed. We say, is it because of race? Is it racism? But when we unpicked it, a lot of the time was because the staff didn't understand the culture behind the recruitment process.
Right.
For example, most of our white colleagues might have had informal chats with their friends who would arrange mock interviews for them. If you've never had a mock interview, when you're faced with a proper interview, you're never going to be able to deliver
get the
your
balance.
best.
Yes.
So what we did, initially we said, HR should arrange mock interviews for us. But then we realized that despite that, things still didn't improve. So what happened is we started getting our colleagues who'd passed the board to arrange mock interviews. But when I say colleagues, I've got to make it very clear. The National Black Crown Prosecution Association wasn't just about ethnic minority staff. It was for all staff who were considered Black. Now, in those days, Black wasn't about your skin tone. It was about your treatment. So we had Irish members. We had Jewish people. You had Asian. We had so many, a kaleidoscope of humanity involved in that network. and we all worked together. We also had lots of allies, so we'd all work together. And when I mean allies, I mean people who were not part of the group, but helped, what really believed in racial justice. So we'd all work together. And that was the thing that really got me on the path about equality, diversity, inclusion, because it was never just about race. It's about your ability or disability. It's about if you had children or you didn't have children. It was about your sexuality. It was about all sorts of things that have an impact on the way people respond to you, the way you're perceived, the way your brilliance or your lack of skill and talent is perceived by people, is impacted by people's biases. So that process was very important. That first probably 10 years for me in the CPS had a big impact on my perception about what was useful and what wasn't. When you add that onto the fact I said, I started to feel a great responsibility for the victims, the witnesses, and the defendants that came through the system that I felt I needed to help, who were disadvantaged. And I never forget one day, this is a very good example. I was in the Crown Court one day in the CPS room, and the defendant came into the room because he was confused. He'd had some letter. He wasn't really sure what he should do. And this was 20 years ago. And the lawyer I was with, a white lady at the time, just started screaming at him, "Get out, get out." Oh, yeah, I was very upset because she didn't ask him what he wanted. He obviously had a simple question. So he left the room, obviously a bit humiliated and confused. And I went out and I went to speak to him and I asked him what the problem was. But I was so angry. And I think that's why I stayed in the CPS for so long, because I felt I had a personal responsibility to plug those gaps and educate people. And I did raise it. When I got back to the office, I raised the outrage I felt that you should speak to somebody like that, because I knew she wouldn't have spoken to anybody like that if they'd been white. So equality and diversity is very important. So that's where it's come from the work I did and my experiences.
Fantastic. I hope you forgive me if I have to stay on CPS, for a little bit more, because I'm sure this is an area that will really educate, Nigerians in diaspora, wherever they are in the world, So please tell us a little bit more, and about your work, with the CPS National Black Crown Prosecution Association itself, and how it has impacted the representation and inclusion of Black professionals in the justice system.
Absolutely. I think the National Black Crown Prosecution Association is the foremost staff network in criminal justice. To me, it's the jewel in the crown of the civil service when it comes to staff networks. We're very advantaged, to be honest. It's not by chance. Because our organization is legal, and the psyche of our organization is about debate and argument based on evidence, it's given us an advantage as a staff network, compared, for example, to the police, who are used to taking orders. You see what I mean?
That's
and it's based on a hierarchy, whereas in the CPS, it's about debate and evidence. So, and our members, generally speaking, are lawyers and legal people, so they have a good understanding of process and procedure. So for our network, what makes us distinctive as well, I say our, although I've left the CPS, my heart's still there.
Yes, sir.
Is when the network was set up, it was set up as a result of the CPS being considered a racist organization and wanting to amend and improve and change its approach to the way it does it. So the way it dealt with staff and the community. So the network was set up not only to support staff within the organization to address HR issues and things like that. It was also set up to help the CPS understand our communities in relation to the way our communities experienced the CPS's services. And the CPS really valued that aspect of our network. But what I found is most networks don't do that. They only I would say they have a very internal focus on how they've been treated within their organization, but they don't actually look at how their organization engages with their communities. It makes a big difference. So I think from that perspective, the CPS really had a huge advantage from the NBCPA. We do so many activities and events to help raise awareness and understanding of our community's experience. I'll just give you an example.
Okay.
An example, female genital mutilation is a big issue that affects a lot of not just African communities, there's even white Christian communities. Sometimes they do female genital mutilation. In America, they do that. But what had happened is everybody got on the bandwagon that this is a really bad cultural phenomena, where you cut out a woman's private parts and stitch. I mean, there's so many horrible things to do with this. Anyway, the CPS, working with the Home Office, has put together a beautiful brochure explaining how this practice was terrible. But when our staff network looked at it in conjunction with our community, we had to give them feedback because the feedback was quite negative. The language used in the brochure said that the practice was barbaric and primitive. Now, on the surface, that might seem fine, but actually underneath it, there's a lot of racism behind that. And what we did, remember, we're an organization that deals with evidence. We were able to say that cutting a girl's genitalia is a terrible practice, a barbaric practice, but you don't use that word when you're talking about women having breast augmentation, where they would cut children's breasts, take out the breast tissue and replace it with a plastic, ball. Some might say that it's not equivalent, but it's the language used. And we did a lot of work with the CPS to raise awareness of community sensitivities like that. And what happened is they changed the language. They removed the words like barbaric and primitive practices. They changed the wording. It's just like I did this conference, which I think is really, really important. I hosted a conference on our ethnic minorities, LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexuals, our communities that were lesbian, gay, bisexual, and their experience of the criminal justice system. Was the first time, I think it's the first and only time they've ever had that kind of conference in the criminal justice system. When I set it up, there was a lot of pushback, as you can imagine, from our network, because, a lot of people are Christians and they don't want to talk about things like that. It doesn't affect their community. That's what they think. But that conference was amazing because I managed to get people from LGBT people from our community to come into the criminal justice system for the first time and explain some of the challenges they faced. And it was a real eye-opener. For example, the CPS became aware that within the LGBT community, there's a lot of racism, where they would have club events and say, no blacks, no dogs, and things like that. But most black gay people would find it difficult to go and report this to the police. Because the first thing people say, well, what are you doing in a gay club in the first place? The kind of, and also there was a lot of violence within our communities toward the gay community. And there was a very good example. There was a Jewish guy who explained that when he came out as gay, some of his dad's friends from the synagogue came and trashed his flat out of anger. But when he went to report it to the police found it was quite amusing. And they didn't seem to understand it was not given any kind of support or
that is actually
that it's his dad's friends doing this. So it was we tend to be very indifferent. And another good example, this is not necessarily through the network, but the level of literacy. This is to do with community engagement. We in the CPS, we love sending letters out. This is before the email. But anytime you get this brown envelope from the government,
Yeah.
you know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're
makes
talking
your
about.
heart beat that, oh my God, what do they want?
I know.
Exactly.
I get that a lot. Yeah.
Exactly. So the CPS used to always rely on sending letters without having an understanding, firstly, that 20% of the UK population can't read and write very well.
Right.
We take it for granted. Even now, during this digital revolution where they want everybody to use smartphones, there's no consideration given to people who can't read and write. There's also an assumption that people who can't read and write are stupid and unintelligent, whereas actually we became aware that people are running multi-million companies without being able to read and write. Because you have coping strategies, you have someone who can read. And for example, we learned, the CPS learned that if you're in court with somebody and you've given them their statement and they say, I haven't got my glasses, can you read it to me? It might be an indication they can't read and write, because that's a coping strategy.
Yeah.
See what I mean?
Rather than saying I can't read, they say I don't have my glasses here.
Exactly.
I get your point.
And it's about the respect and not making a judgment about people. And that's part of the role the NBCPA has done a lot of, especially in relation to legislation. When they bring new legislation in, we would look at the legislation. We would help our communities by doing consultation activities. We'd say, this legislation's come in, let's go through it together so we can explain what it's about and let's hear your views. It's all part of community engagement. We do all sorts of things. We do work experience. Most young black,
yeah,
rarely get opportunities to have work experience in places like the CPS, mainly because when you have work experience, it will be based on, if you're working there, you can bring your son in, you can bring your cousin. If you're not working, if you haven't got anybody working in the organization, it's very unlikely you're going to get the chance to see what it's like. So we do a lot of work experience opportunities. We'd all rally, so we'd deliver a program, bringing kids in. We did so much. And a lot of the stuff we did, it wasn't done in spite of the CPS. It was done in partnership, because we understood as a network that anything we did is a reflection on the CPS.
Yes.
And the CPS got it. They understood that everything we did was a reflection on them. So they supported, so we were funded. They gave us facility time. I mean, it wasn't much time, but they still gave us facility time. And those conferences I mentioned, they were funded. They would pay for us to have a conference, have people in the hotel and everything, because they knew the output was going to be excellent. So we did so much. I mean, I can't even. A lot of the stuff we did as well was to help empower our members, and that's one other thing. Just one other thing. A lot of ethnic minority, we have so many skills and talents that are often subdued at work, or you're not given the opportunity. You can get someone doing a law course who actually their passion is accountancy, but every time they apply to go into the finance team, they're pushed back. They're not given the opportunity. So what we used to do, we'd encourage members, if you have a passion or a skill, get involved in the network so you can evidence it better. So we had people who were amazing building websites, and this is outside work, but they would come and help the network. We had a fantastic website. We were doing blogs. It was amazing what we were able to do by just encouraging our members to fully participate and understand how they to benefit. For example, making sure if you took part in any of the meetings, you recorded it in your performance development report. Even just attending a conference, we show people how to articulate that in their performance development, to say not only did you attend, what was the benefit, did it bring you, and all. That's a completely different education as well, which a lot of people are missing out on, which we try to raise awareness of through our network. So sorry.
No, it's very interesting. Now, you see, talking about how you have this inclusion for members and how you were able to train them, talking about website, I would first of all like to say thank you for registering on NACAID website, and I'm sure you had time to go around the website to understand the features and benefits for members. I'd like to ask with you from you rather, that I'm sure you know that at NACAID we emphasize the importance of breaking barriers and amplifying voices. Now, how can such organizations collaborate with legal systems, to foster greater inclusivity? What do you think? What's your take on that?
First, I'd like to say I love your website. I think the
Thank you.
idea behind it is amazing, bringing communities together to showcase their skill, their talent, their networks, their businesses, their ideas. It's just brilliant. And I'm really excited to be part of that. I think one of the most important things we can do as professionals is, if you're aware that there's a consultation done by the government or anybody else, is getting your community involved. I think that is so important. One of the things that we can all do, whether you're an architect or, there's always consultations going on.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, if you're just an ordinary member of the public, they seem so complicated and convoluted. And you think, oh, I don't know if there's a consultation that they're going to be changing the architecture of the train station in London. I think, oh, I don't think I'm qualified. But as a member of the community, it's our responsibility to simplify these things, right, so we can get people's opinion. We can get our community's opinion on these things and submit our community's opinion. That's one thing I didn't realize how powerful that was.
Right. Fantastic. Let's look a little bit outside your time at CPS. Now as the founder and director of Carbonado Consultancy, tell our viewers a little bit. Carbonado, what does that mean?
Carbonado actually means black diamond.
Really?
Yes, that's the official name of a diamond. That is not clear. It's for black one. It's called carbonado. Carbonado's actually used a lot of a lot of the industrial diamonds that they use to cut things. Usually they're carbonados. They're black diamonds. And obviously, it's a reflection on my organization. We know our values, where we create brilliant creative strategies. Mm-hmm. We're very resilient, and we help businesses maximize their profits as much as they can, right, based on their corporate social responsibility approach. Right. Okay. People think that by being corporate, being a benevolent organization is just a charitable aspect, but no, actually, it makes you a lot of money. It increases your profits. It raises your business's profile if you do it properly.
Yeah, right. So can you share a little bit more or give us some examples of innovative projects or strategies that have made a significant impact with your clients?
I just remembered. We had a conference, the African Caribbean Sustainable Investment Conference. Was one of the projects I was involved in, where the conference was set up to bring Africa and the Caribbean together to look at investment opportunities, to not focus on expecting other countries, I use that, to help us when we can actually help ourselves, and to give the Caribbean an understanding of why they should be engaging with Africa. I'll just give you an example. Yeah. When it comes to tourism, in Nigeria, we need a more robust, focused approach to develop our tourism. Whereas in Jamaica, they're experts at tourism. They could have a puddle somewhere and make money from that. We're having people jump in with blindfolds on, and you know what I mean? They know what they're doing. But instead of asking people from the Jamaica, how can we improve our
tourism industry?
We're asking people from Holland, when actually we should be asking our communities, our diaspora in the Caribbean. So that conference brought people together. It raised awareness and understanding of how we can work better together. I remember they had a wonderful gentleman called Shegun. My brain has gone dead about his surname. Oh my Lord. But Shegun was the director and chair of the Nigerian Manufacturers Association. Okay. Nigerian Manufacturing Association. And what he was saying is that they're setting up national across Africa manufacturing associations to put together an African-wide manufacturing association that they can go to places like the UN to talk about manufacturing across Africa. Because at the moment, for example, our voices, if it's just one voice, it's not heard very well.
It's not heard very well.
So it kind of shows you how we feed in to things like that. And also I've worked with Deutsche Bank on raising awareness of organizational change. I've done presentations and workshops with them, with Bio, raising awareness. I've worked with Ofgem, where I've Carbonado, we've given them narratives about energy and living in energy crisis for ethnic minority communities, what it's like for them. A lot of the time, these big companies, the feedback they get is from the mainstream.
Right.
Just like how, from the white community, basically. They don't understand the nuance in Nigeria, that it's big business, big money. And even me, I'd love to have a durian farm. I don't know if anyone knows what a durian fruit is, but it's a very, very stinky fruit from Southeast Asia. It's so smelly, you're not even allowed to have any hotels. However, it's huge in antioxidants. If you've got cancer and stuff like that, it's an amazing fruit to eat. It's a lovely, it's a delicious fruit, but it stinks. But Chinese people pay a lot of money for these fruits. I know there's an opportunity. So when it comes to corporate social responsibility, there's so much we can do. We can promote diversity, inclusion, particularly among our women. I'm so proud of Nigerian women that, I've been doing some work on banking and energy events, and the number of women in positions of seniority in Nigeria in banking and finance is just, I felt like weeping, to be honest, because I know 20 years previously that would not have happened. Well, there wasn't. It was mainly white men they would put in charge of banks, and maybe the assistant would be Nigerian, but now you've got Nigerian women. What does that tell you? There's been a renaissance in relation to equality, diversity, and inclusion. Well, I know 20 years ago, people would say, if you want to be director of a bank, your husband is going to be problems in your marriage. Don't be director. But the fact that women are, it's true. They will say,
it's true. I remember
if your wife is the boss somewhere, she'll come home and be bossing
and be bossy over you. Don't let your wife earn more than you, things like that.
Exactly. But thank God, inclusion has shown that that's a stupid way of thinking.
Yes.
You have to raise each other. There's also so many investment networks going on that people are mentoring each other. They're supporting each other in business. Whereas, 20 years ago, you wouldn't have got as much of that, mainly because of the perception of embarrassment somehow that you're doing something wrong to assist, you're giving your community an unfair advantage. When actually you have to look at the Asian community. I do admire their approach to things. Remember Rishi Sunak when he was the Prime Minister? Now, I don't know if you know, but as far as I'm concerned, from my experience, the Asian community, there's lots of infighting, a lot of fighting and acrimonious behavior between the Sikhs and the Muslims and it's shocking, actually. However, they always put on a united front. Not one person, I can't, because Rishi Sunak is a Hindu, I didn't hear one Muslim say, Rishi Sunak is going to disadvantage Muslims. Even when everything was going on with Palestine, not one of them came out to condemn him. And I think it's a lesson for us as Nigerians that we need to support each other. You might not agree with each other, but we need to support each other more.
I agree with you 101% on that topic. Yes. Let's now look at your achievements. Receiving an MBE in 2018 is a tremendous achievement, no doubt. How did it feel to be recognized at that level? And what does this honor mean to you personally and professionally?
It was a massive shock. I could honestly, and it's the equivalent of a chieftaincy title, to be honest with you. That's what it's equivalent to being made a chief. But it was amazing. I couldn't believe it, particularly when you work in an organization where you think you're always wrestling with unfairness, and the fact that my work in community engagement and other things was acknowledged, I thought it was wonderful. What was even better for me was my mum. I took my mum to the ceremony,
Right.
And I think for her, it was wonderful because my mum
Right.
is, those in the old school, the royalist, it was part of the colonial thing where the
Colonial,
king and
yeah.
queen. My mum was disappointed that I had Prince William and not Charles, because my mother said she loves Charles. She's always had a crush on Charles from when she was a young woman. My mum is in her 80s. It's the late 80s
Right.
now. But it was lovely. I felt so
Bless her.
proud taking her.
Yeah.
And it was a wonderful occasion. And I'll always be very proud of it. And to me, it's an acknowledgement that all my efforts have been acknowledged. Whereas sometimes you put yourself out there, you take risks by putting your head above the parapet. Normally it gets shot off. Usually it does. But to be acknowledged like that was lovely.
Oh, that's interesting. Well done. Well done. Now, as a leader in various networks, like the Civil Service Race Forum, what strategies have you used to drive systemic change within large organizations? I know you mentioned quite a few, just a few minutes ago, but our viewers would like to know more about your strategies.
I think for me, the strategy I always use is positive reinforcement.
Right.
I think it doesn't work when you trying to institute change and it's from a negative perspective. You're doing this wrong. Everything is bad. You have to find a way of providing some positive reinforcement. I think organizations are like people. They have a psychology, they have a personality, and you have to lean into that and understand what kind of personality your organization is before you embark on change. Like I told you, the CPS is very argumentative, where we need evidence. It has to if you want things to change, you have to put your evidence together in a particular way. You can't be emotional about it. And I think a lot of Black, ethnic minority people, marginalized people, we experience a lot of trauma, terrible trauma from the way we're treated. I mean, even if I think about things that have happened for me in the CPS, you can get angry, you can get upset, but sometimes you have to put that to one side and also not think about yourself.
Right.
This is also an issue, particularly when it comes to progression. A lot of people argue progression from their perspective. So I wasn't promoted. How are we going to do it so I can get promotion? I want mentorship. You've got to, if you want organizational change, you have to put your interest to one side and look at the interests of the many and not about you personally. And I've seen that so many times where people are in positions of leadership, especially in staff networks, and it becomes about individuals wanting to achieve their goals.
They are selfish goals. Let's say that way.
I won't use the word selfish because the trauma means they feel they're entitled somehow because of what they've gone through. But sometimes you've got to, for example, I'll just give you an example.
Right.
If there's an opportunity to travel to Belgium for a conference for your network, sometimes you think, well, I should go because I'm the chair. But actually, you have to think who is best placed to go. Even though you might want to go, but actually, in the interest of the group, the network, the staff, the community, who is best placed? It doesn't have to be you.
That will be you.
And it's part of our culture as well. Nigeria, we have a history of being selfish. And I'm hoping, the context is about the country.
I understand. Yeah.
And how in the past, it was always about, I have to enjoy, or it has to be me. How can you put, I have to be the one to go. When actually we have to get to a point where we understand it's not going to be us. It might be our grandchildren. It might be our great-grandchildren are going to go to that event. So we need to prepare the way for them to get there. And I think that's the new mindset that we have to take in relation to organizational change. It might not be us that experience that change, but we have to put everything in place. So the advantage might be for those coming behind us.
Please permit me to still stay on this topic. I'll probably just ask you, thinking about inclusion and community. Now, with community engagement, I know it's been the cornerstone of your work. What approaches have been most effective in building trust and awareness in diverse community? I'm asking that question based on what you've just said now, so that our viewers, Nigerians, both in diaspora at home, can begin to have a sense of understanding of how we can have that selfless, approach to community building.
I think from my experience, community building starts with humility first. You have to acknowledge you're not really sure of what people's views are. And when you go into the community, you must expect a negative response. That might be anger, it might be frustration. You have to acknowledge that and let that and respect that. You know how people say, oh, the government has done it. If you're a member of the government, you're trying to get community, you have to embrace that anger and hostility, because once that has blown off, that is when you start the proper dialogue. And in organizations like the CPS, I can tell you that not every senior leader was comfortable. You go to meetings where you want to talk to them about a new domestic abuse policy, and people get there, they start shouting at you about things that have got nothing to do with the CPS. They say, oh, my cousin was arrested and put in prison falsely. It's you people. You have to engage with that respectfully. You have to not say, well, it's got nothing to do with us. You've got to say, oh, tell me what happened. Oh, although it's nothing to do with us, we'll refer you to blah, blah, blah. That takes time. And a lot of senior people find that the most difficult. They say, I'm too busy. I don't have time to talk to people about things like that. But actually, you have to make the time. That's why we were very successful in the CPS, is after that initial anger blew off, then you can have that proper engagement with people. But you have to let people blow off steam, even if you're not the cause of their anger and frustration. Like in Nigeria, you get people. I saw a video about the roads. They've just made some beautiful roads in Abuja, and somebody has taken all of the steel, the drains, and the person who did the video was very angry. I'm not sure who he put his anger on, but ideally the Minister of Roads, I'm just giving an example, should have a meeting with the guy on camera. Let the guy voice off. It's not the minister or Tinubu's fault someone has stolen those things. But when people get it off their chest, then they can explain, actually, we're going to put CCTV cameras there now, or something else to try and stop this from happening. You have to go through that rather than to say, I'm not going to talk to them. Because you have to have that kind of initial dialogue.
Right.
Like I said, that's the most painful part, to be honest, of community engagement, getting through the initial misunderstanding. And in Nigeria, we tend to be quite impatient we want things to happen overnight. That's one thing also I've learned in the UK, that they have planning. They're very strategic, and there's also what they call due process. There's a wonderful man I met. He was based in Leicester, and he's an African guy called Peter. And one of his amazing strengths, he tries to educate the community about due process. So what would happen sometimes? The UK government would say, "We set up, let the community, the Nigerian community, we're going to set up some community forum for them to talk about issues, but we need to have a forum and an advisory group." And people wouldn't understand the difference. And they say, oh, well, I want to be on the forum and the advisory group. So what Peter would do is explain the difference and why there needed to be a difference. But people got very angry because they thought, if I'm in the forum, why can't I be in the... But that patience of explaining the due process is the process for getting things done in a way. In the UK, they need a structure to things. And I think I met a professor who said in Africa, they're trying to find processes that are more culturally appropriate to our culture.
Dynamics,
our culture that are not necessarily the English way, but finding a way of dealing with things. And I know, another good example, in the Onibadan, they have a system for selecting the Oba.
The Oba, the king. Yes, that's true.
And there's no arguments in Ibadan. They know exactly who's going to, because of that system. And it's a complicated system. It's
Very
not a
complicated.
simple system, but
I'm from
everybody
Ibadan, so I
understands
know.
it. Exactly, but it's a system that
But it's a
works.
system that works.
Exactly. So we can do it. We do have our systems, and that's a good example that we have to find systems that work for us.
Yes.
To get things done.
To get things done. Very interesting. Okay. How do you see NACADE and similar organizations playing a role in bridging gaps and promoting inclusion, both within Nigeria diaspora and then beyond?
NACADE has a great opportunity to set the standard as in relation to leadership. I think what's important is setting the standard. So you're going to have a lot of networks registering and people sharing information. I think the most important thing NACADE can do is be very strict with what your values are and principles. If you say certain things aren't allowed, nipping them in the bud immediately and not allowing some people to do things. And I think that's what sets the standard and values.
Yeah.
And with what the offer for NACADE is going to be quite interesting as people get the opportunity to participate and actually start feeling confident in sharing their ideas for the networks, sharing their business and their skills and talent. It's going to be interesting seeing as NACADE goes along how it develops.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I made a few notes on that because it's something I like to take on board as well. Now, what do you see as the biggest challenge or opportunities in advancing equality, diversity, and inclusion in today's world? Technology and everything. What do you see?
It's a big one. In the world. I think it's human nature, to be honest with you, is the biggest challenge. I personally, for my equality and diversity philosophy, I feel human beings, we've removed ourselves from our true nature. We're animals. Whether we're the high, we think of ourselves as not animals. I think we are animals. And for example, when you talk about predators on the planet, people will say, oh, it's a lion or a tiger or a crocodile. We're the top predator on this planet, but we deny our violence. We deny that we're violent. It's innate. It's part of our biology, but we pretend it isn't. Or we'll say things, oh, only those people are violent. We're all violent. And as long as we acknowledge our true nature, then we can make provision for inclusion. And I'm not saying violence as in we're going to be stabbing each other, but we express our violence in different ways. To me, racism is a form of violence.
True.
It's a suppressed violence. Even misogyny is a form of violence. Saying, oh, a woman can't do... It's a way of exerting your, hostility without using a knife. So just acknowledging that, I think that's the biggest barrier, that we're in denial of our nature. And I think if we acknowledged our true nature, we'd make better laws and guidance and legislation. For example, if we allowed lions to roam around the street, there'll be proper provision in place to make sure people are safe. Even though lions are roaming, there might be tame lions, but we know a lion can turn on you at any minute. But we don't make legislation like that for human beings, even though we know, especially from a criminal perspective, negative behavior is common. It's just the way we are. We can't help ourselves sometimes when it comes to, robbery. We think of criminal behavior in relation to stealing, but actually a lot of crime isn't stealing. It's the desire to oppress, whether it's sexual violence, domestic violence, it's about oppression, So I think that's the biggest barrier to equality, the fact we're denying our true nature.
Our true nature. Fantastic. So in that case then, what legacy do you hope to leave through your work, both at Carbonado Consultancy and in your broader, contributions to the society?
Legacy. I think for me, a good legacy to leave would be for the younger generation to understand how much power they have to control the future. That a lot of young people feel very hopeless that the planet is going to Mars. But actually, they don't realize that they have a choice, because time flies very quickly, whether we like it or not. And it's what they do now that's going to impact further on, empowering young people, particularly girls in this society. I'm talking about generally that consistently tells women that they have lower value, when actually, I'm just giving an example, biologically, if you're an alpha male, I'm talking about biologically, you're a strong, fit, you have girls, because that's nature says for you to continue your what do they call it, your DNA. Females, children are the best for making sure you continue to live through them, rather than boys. But strangely, we say, oh, it's better to have a boy. Actually, it's women who add value. You know, I'm not saying that boys don't.
I understand you. You know, I'm just trying to say
it's strange to me the way we turn our nature upside down and inside out. I just think it's very, very strange. So my legacy would be to empower young people, young women in particular, to see how much power they have, and that actually they can change the world and make the world a better place if they choose to. And what I want to do is help them with that, help empower them to do that.
Fantastic. That's great. I'm sure they will be looking forward to that. Now, let's have some quick fire segment now. Fun questions.
Yes.
So tell my viewers, please, what's your favorite Nigerian dish?
Amala, to be honest.
That shows your time in Ibadan.
Yeah, I love amala. And ojojo, which is grated, isn't that grated yam? That's yes, I haven't had that for, oh my gosh.
Wow.
I don't want to say how many years. I don't want to give my age away. Too many decades.
Okay.
I'm going to try that, actually. I have to try ojojo today. I'm going to try
yourself, but I'm not too sure if you can find that particular yam.
Yes.
Because it's a different one. You know, I don't know what it's called now, but
I don't know either.
I'm sure you can find the other yam, the normal regular yam.
Yes. You think you could do the same thing? Grate it.
I don't think so.
And what about the ojojo that they put in leaves and steam it? What's that called?
That's ikuru.
Yeah. Is it ikure?
Ikuru? No, ikuru. Yes.
Ekuru, yes.
Yeah, it's called ekuru.
Ekuru.
They use the same yam. I think they use the same yam, but it's one that is very slurry.
Yes, it's like a water yam or something.
When you put water, it's like water yam. That's what makes it, it's very nice. Yeah.
My grandmother used to make that when Ijebu grandma. She would make those ojojo.
Lovely. They do ikokore and ojojo.
Yes.
And ekuru. I think ekuru is beans, it's not yam.
No,
I think I got it wrong. It's the kokore that is yam.
Yes.
Yes.
No, I had lovely memories of my grandmother in Nigeria. Beautiful memories.
Wow. That's
what was the other question? That was food.
Yeah, that was about the food, which you say you like amala. Very good. My next question on that same topic: who is a Nigerian figure, past or present, that inspires you?
To be honest with you, it has to be Fela Kuti's mom.
Right.
My brain, what was her name? My brain has gone dead, but I've done articles on her.
Right.
What was Fela's mom? Agbatido. What's it called? Old age. What was her name? She is my role model for Nigeria.
Right, for Nigeria.
She's an amazing woman.
Amazing.
We should have a museum dedicated to her.
I think the Fela family must have, I think they have a museum, but I think they have more of Fela's artifacts.
Fela, but actually his mother.
But I think his mother,
His mother is amazing. She was a suffragette.
Yes.
And very highly educated. What she did for the market women.
Even at the time.
Yeah, she's my role model for us.
Fantastic.
I'd love to be.
Since we are coming towards the end of the podcast, if you could give one piece of advice to your younger self, what will it be?
One piece of advice. Oh my gosh, did I write this down? Let me see. Because I know you gave me, I thought I wrote something interesting.
Yeah.
I think it's enjoy the moment. I think first advice I'd give to my younger self is just to live your life and not be inhibited by what other people think about you, but follow your passion and dreams. I mean, that's not what I really like to say, but I can't remember the actual thing. But yeah, just follow your passion and dreams. I think it's important. I think particularly in Nigeria, where I did fine arts, and I think I had so much negative messages about, oh, you're not going to make money. I wish I'd followed that properly. I did sculpture, and even though I loved fine art and I still use it till today, I wish I'd been more focused on my passion.
Right. That's interesting. Okay, before we conclude,
Yes.
Is there a message you would like to share with our audience, especially Nigerians in the diaspora, about staying resilient and pursuing their dreams, which is something we just said now, but I just wanted to be more around that topic, for Nigerians and the younger ones.
Yeah, I think in Nigeria at the moment, even though things seem very tough, you guys are living during an amazing time.
Right.
You have access to knowledge that was denied us when we were in Nigeria.
True.
Your smartphones, you can get all the information on the planet on your phones now. And it's about you making the best of the opportunity. You don't need to come here to London and America. I can tell you, in 50 years, even less than that, everyone is coming to Nigeria.
Yeah.
So what you need to do now is establish yourself, establish your business, do whatever you want. So when people start coming, they're going to be coming to you.
Right.
Yeah.
In that case, how can people connect with you or learn more about your work and the services you provide?
I'm on LinkedIn.
Okay.
So yeah, they can contact me. That's the only social media I actually use, LinkedIn.
Okay.
I've got a website if anybody wants to drop me a message. But yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm always connecting with people. Lots of people from Nigeria always connect with me. So it'll be great to catch up.
Fantastic. And lastly, what's on the horizon for Grace Moronfolu? Is there any, do you have anything exciting projects or initiatives that we should be looking forward to?
I'm hoping, I'm planning to run a conference on energy, gas, and oil this year, towards the end of the year. So I'm quite excited about that. That is in the offing of your 2-day conference. Right. So yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to. So if any of you who are running energy companies in Nigeria and are looking for opportunities to raise the profile of your organization, or if you have something to contribute to the conference, please get in touch.
Fantastic. Grace Moronfolu, thank you for sharing your invaluable insights and for your incredible contributions to advancing equality, diversity, and inclusion. Do you have any final thoughts or message, for our audience?
Well, just that it's been a privilege to share my thoughts with you, Anthony.
Yeah.
It's been a great privilege indeed. And I just think sometimes we take life for granted. I remember Femi from college in Nigeria. Yeah. So I just think it's such a blessing to be able to be speaking to you like this. It's just wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
And to you, our audience, don't hesitate to connect with Grace Moronfolu MBE to learn more about our impactful work. Also, visit nake.com to stay engaged with our Nigerian heritage and community. Follow us for more inspiring stories and thoughtful, provoking conversations like this one. Thank you, goodbye, and God bless.